how old is too old to have a child? The older you wait to have a child, like you don't have that much time left to be with them. 10 years later at 68, yeah, the child would be 10. It's not that easy, you think, to have a child really late. I think this was a miracle, like a complete miracle. So what if, men can have children and they don't have to worry about the clock ticking and they can have it whenever they want? But it's just plain selfish if you decide to have a child when you're 70. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Love and Life Sorted. We were previously Date Right for Your Type, and thank you so much for your support. We have reached over 100 downloads. And yeah, it's a big deal for a small growing podcast like mine. And I'd love to take this opportunity to thank everyone for listening and watching and supporting. Yeah, you'd have no idea how much it means. And let's grow this podcast together. And let me know if there's any new topics or suggestions that you would like me to talk about and we can chat about because, well, life is about love fundamentally. Love for a relationship, love for a partner, love for a kid, love for family, love of nature, love of interests, like anything you can think of, right? So, and life is messy, so and needs sorted. So let's do that one chat at a time. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about fertility. Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about how old is too old to have a child. Right, so there was a piece of news that you may have heard of if you lived in Hong Kong, especially about a 58-year-old woman having a second child. Yeah, so her first child she had when she was 52, right? And so after 6 years later, she had another daughter at 58. Okay, so that is old. I don't think anyone would reject to saying that 58 is quite old for having a child. And I think it leveled the Hong Kong record. So, like ages ago, there actually was already one woman who had a child at 58, but just one only. And so this one leveled the game. Okay. So it hadn't surpassed it, it hadn't broken the record. And if it hasn't broken Hong Kong record, it hasn't broken the world record. So world record, I know of even older who have had children. But yeah, like I think we would all admit that 58 is categorized as old. Okay, so there's no doubt about that. So how old is too old to have a child? Yeah, so that is a bit of a controversial matter because there would be some people who say, well, if I'm healthy and I can carry it healthily and the child has no defects, and I have gone to the doctor many times to do checkups and found that the baby is healthy and thriving and I can have it with no problem, then it's none of anyone's business. It's just my business only if I am to bear this responsibility, right? So what business is it of you guys to comment and to criticize my choice, right? So the choice is mine to have a child whenever I want, as long as I'm healthy and well. So health issues aside, I think there are other issues that can be discussed relating to how old is too old for having a baby. Okay, so just like recap on the situation of the 58-year-old woman. It turned out okay. She had a baby who's healthy and thriving and lively as ever. Because the first daughter that she had at 52 is lively and thriving as ever. And let's hope that this new one is also the same. Yeah. So like it's great on their part. Okay, so everything worked out as they had wished. And yeah, we give them our blessings, of course. Okay, so what about like other issues that's like aside from health issues, aside from defects, if everything is doing normally, then why is it a controversial issue to have a child late, like quite late, as in 58? Okay, so why is that controversial? Okay, so first of all, okay, 20 years later, or let's say 10 years later at 68, yeah, the child would be 10, right? So what if you're healthy now, like at 58 in your 50s, you're still okay, like you would say that you're at the prime of life, probably. Yeah, you're still engaging in a lot of exercise and a lot of activities, and you're very athletic. You do tons of exercise and you work out and stuff. But still, I think age is age, and you probably cannot reverse it. I know that some billionaires would say otherwise, right? So tons of billionaires uh piling on like millions to try to reverse aging, right? So let's see if that works out. But as of now, in this generation, I think that we all encounter like a very realistic problem. A very realistic issue is that for sure that our energy levels have dropped compared to, say, in our 30s, for instance, like 20s and 30s. Like that's the most lively sort of energetic period. And like you can do anything. You don't need to take naps. Like for one have not taken one nap before during my 20s. Yeah, I mean I can party late and I can go back to work in the same clothes and I didn't feel tired at all. I just needed like several cups of coffee and even like the makeup, everything's intact because your skin, right, your quality of skin and your quality of your energy, everything is like tip top shape. So I can like handle anything at that time. But the reverse, the sad truth is that you can see yourself going downhill as you age, and that is like a fact of life. Do you still have the energy levels to crawl like about with your child, or to run after them when they run around the house, or to keep up with them when they're in those play groups? Like there's just like scattering all over the place, and you have to like ensure that they don't bump around and they don't, they don't bump this, bump that, and ensure that they're safe and everything. I remember, yeah, I it wasn't tremendously late when I had my son. I was still in my 30s, my mid 30s. I felt that I still had adequate energy and I would still go to all these activities and play groups and play dates with him with no big issue. Yeah, at that time I was tired because obviously like my body was still recovering. Yeah, I mean like after pregnancy your body doesn't recover after like only after a year or something or more. And the younger the recovery is faster. And like I had a natural birth with no complication, and that helped as well. So, but for like C-section deliveries, I think like the scar and everything, it takes even longer to recover. And according to Chinese medicine terms, like you have to eat so much, and you have to like replenish so much of your energy during that time, like to be back in the shape that you once were. Okay. But anyhow, like I felt that at that time, I was still okay in terms of keeping up with him. But like fast forward to 8 years later, I'm so sure that if now I had another child, I would not be able to keep up the same. I would not be able to crawl around and like to try to catch up with him and to run around with him, uh, like a child, like how active they are. I cannot keep up with their hyperactive sort of lifestyle, right? So, um, I have no doubt that like a 58-year-old would not have the same energy level. As much as they wish they did, the reality is that you just don't. You can't reverse aging, at least not now. Okay, so maybe fast forward like 10 years later, maybe those billionaires would successfully discover something. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, but emperors of the past, during like 1,000 years ago, they have tried to discover like the elixir of longevity ages ago and like died trying, and like who knows in this day and age, like new technology, maybe new findings, another elixir of life. Yeah, but before that occurs, I think that it's not realistic to think that we're at the same energy level as we were when we were in our late 20s or early 30s. It's just not possible. Okay, so for one, it's difficult to keep up with the child. Like you can't contribute the same energy to deal with them, and it's sort of not fair to them. I had a conversation with my son, or this is like a recurring sort of conversation that like pops up once in a while. He actually said, sometimes he looks at old photos of him that come up on the screensaver or my phone, and then he looks and he says, "Oh, you were younger back then when I was a baby." He would say something like, "Mom, I wish that you were still 30 now and we could have much more time to spend together and you would have the energy to go do more things with me." Yeah, and most importantly, if you were 30 now, we would have more time to spend before you passed away. Yeah, like I feel quite sad actually hearing that. Uh, because that is the truth. There aren't that many years left. If you like the older you wait to have a child, like you don't have that much time left to be with them. And especially if you're 58 when you had the child, say I give you until you're 98, okay? I'll give you 40 years of your life. And your child would be 40. Okay, so by the time they're 40, you would have probably left. And that would be like quite quite that would be quite a shame. That would be quite sad for the child to have lost their parents by like natural causes at the age of 40 in their prime. Okay, so yeah, it would be so great if if the say you were married and had kids, if your parents could play the role of grandparents and be able to see you through in your marriage and having kids and that whole endeavor, that whole key phase of life, and be able to play with the grandchild, to play with, to hang out with the grandchildren, right? To play a role of grandparents. That would be so delightful, right? If they had the chance, that is. But, if you're 40 and like they maybe just caught like a glimpse of the grandchildren and they had passed away, it would be such a pity. And that is just like the sad reality is that you cannot combat life, right? You cannot prolong the life. Yeah, so I'm just like stating something that's very truthful and very honest. Like I'm not like sugarcoating it or looking through rose-tinted glasses to say that it won't happen because you cannot fight life, right? So you cannot like throw on your invisibility cloak like in Harry Potter, the Deathly Hallows, and hide from death, right? So yeah, death will come upon you in your old age, and that is like a sad fact, sad but true. So the longer, if you wait, like it's so extreme. If you had a child at 58, so when they're 40, you would have passed away, like let's just say natural causes, okay? So barring anything in between, barring any illness or anything, you would have still passed away and they would have lost their parents at 40, like the prime of their life. And it's quite sad. Like yeah, I'm sure that like they would have loved it if their parents were there to see them through for a longer period of time. Yeah, well, that's something that I personally really treasure. I know that a lot of friends have, at my age, have lost their parents because of illness or because of old age. But yeah, there's something that like I'm really thankful for, and my husband is very thankful for, is that we have really healthy set of parents still there, and they're still hanging out like robustly with us and their grandchild, and we really like we see them once or twice a week, and like uh my parents-in-law, they're still actively, driving around, and they're still transporting my son to and fro from activities. And yeah, I'm just like mega mega thankful for that. Right, the fact that they're still healthy and there, I mean, that's something that I pray and I express my gratitude every day for. Yeah. So that's why I feel really strongly and very sadly that um if the child were to lose their parents at like natural causes at 40, that's like around my age, right? So I can't imagine that. And to old age, like not to sickness or anything, but to natural, the natural living and dying process. And that would be such a shame. So what about if they get sick? Okay, so I mean, as I said, like even though my parents and my parents-in-law, they're still really healthy, fundamentally on the whole, but still like older people, they have various like ailments that old people just have, right? And it's inevitable, it's unpreventable, and you just have to deal the best with it, right? And so like another thing is if like the older parents, they get sick and the burden falls on like say a 10-year-old, how how the heck will they deal with it? I can hardly imagine. Okay, so say for instance, our parents now, if they fall sick or anything, we can readily deal with it with our life experience, with our age, with our resources, with everything. Like no problem at all. We're there. But if like a 58-year-old, had a child and they're 68, like after 10 years, 68, who knows? Like maybe like minor sickness, it can it can just be something really minor and you had to go see a doctor and you needed help with go seeing a doctor. And say maybe your spouse wasn't there, like the other 68-year-old person, or they themselves were actually not very vital, as well. That they themselves were not very healthy as well. So like who's gonna go see the doctor with you? Your 10-year-old daughter? Like who are you gonna rely on then? Right? So it's just not realistic. Like fast forward 10 years later, who knows? Like let's pray and wish that they would be healthy as and robust as always, okay? So, and this issue never crops up. Yeah, but until then, we always have to think of, contingency plans and stuff. So what ifs, right? So like that is what like a practical person thinks about. Yeah, so the burden would fall on like the 10-year-old child to take care of their parents. Of course, now they would say, like, it's okay. We're not going to be a burden to them. We have like ample financial resources and everything's taken care of. And we have people to call about, and we don't need the burden to be on our child. Of course, it's easy for you to say, but in the child's perspective, have you thought about that? Will the child be happy if they knew that their parents were sick and they could do nothing about it and they had to rely on other, I don't know, younger people like social workers or family friends or cousins or something that are older, and you would just sit there at home. You cannot do anything but wait, right? So I don't think mentally or emotionally it fares well for the child to know that they're too young to help out with their parents' ailments. So, like, even though you say there's no burden, the burden falls upon the child. So that's another like contention, area of contention. Okay, so yeah, that brings us to the question of why do you want to have a child? Like, why do you want to bring them into the world, right? I know this is a very philosophical issue, and people don't probably have exact answers to it until they had a child. It's usually like a natural progression, right? So take myself, for instance, like you get married, and the natural progression perhaps is to have a child and then to have like a complete family, to enjoy family life and those things, right? And then you learn to become a parent as you go along, like by example from your own parents and also from you learning, the facts of life as you go along, learning and falling and learning again, those things. Yeah, but the key issue is like if it's like happening later in life, right? So why is it that you want to have a child if you have like why is it that you want to have the child in the first place if you are not of a very convenient age? The case of the 50-year-old woman, it was because she had one when she was 52. It was like a miracle baby, and she really, really wanted a sibling for that baby. And her daughter at 6 years old, like kept begging for a sibling. Yes, she's not the only one that I heard from my own friends who say that they want to have a second child because their first one is lonely and that they need a sibling, or that they're begging and begging for a sibling, and they wouldn't like give up until they had one. Mm, yeah, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that that is a valid reason for having a second child, especially if it happens quite late in life? Well, okay, the only good thing I can think of is that they would have a sibling. So they're not, if they're 10 years old, they're not going it alone when their parents are 70. Okay, so they at least have someone else to share the burden, an older sister or brother. And perhaps, like, even though they can't really do anything about it, they can commiserate together, or they can have each other's shoulders to lean on. Right. So the only good thing about having a sibling when you're quite old is when your parents are quite old is that you have someone else to shoulder the burden, at least. So it's not just like a 10-year-old being with a 70-year-old's, parents. So what if you say, what if I don't find someone by the time that is considered too old to have a child, right? So do I have to keep waiting? And it's not my fault that I've waited so long and still haven't met anyone. And then by the time I have met someone, I'm already at the age that you think is too old to have a child. It's not my fault, right? So what do I do? Do I forgo my chance of having a child just because I'm considered too old by society or by modern medicine? Well, that is like a very pertinent issue. I would say that you should, put the matter into your own hands, right? You should not wait. So my verdict is that if having a child is like your lifelong dream, since you were a kid and you still haven't found someone to have it with by the time that you are like borderline or something in your maybe mid 30s, then I would just say, well, go ahead and do your thing. Like take the matter into your own hands. And you can consider like maybe having one on your own, or maybe adopting a child, taking care of a child that needs the care. Yeah, I have a really good friend who is considering this option because like she hasn't found someone, and she probably doesn't want to bear a child on her own. And also she actually thinks that there are so many child in need, so many orphans out there who need a home, who need love. And she's like, has a really big heart, and she's very, very ready to give it. Yeah. And she is considering this option. And that's very, very admirable. I would love to have her talk about it when the time comes. Yeah. So Everyone's fertility journey is so different. Even for women who have not found a partner, there are various women like Mel, yeah, my fellow podcaster Mel Johnson with The Stork and I. She has set up an organization to help women who are considering having children on their own because they haven't found a partner at the right time and they don't want to wait. They probably don't want to wait until 58 to have a child, right? So what if it doesn't happen? Are they going to forego the opportunity just because they couldn't find a man? Right. So it's not fair to them. And, it's not fair to them. And so, yeah, for women who are considering having a child on their own, who have a lot of love to give, who have like who have a maternal side that they want to tap into, then yeah, you can visit Mel and her group for more opinions on that, for more evaluations and more support as well. Yeah, so it's really unfair, I know, that women have to bear in mind their biological clocks, and it's not that easy, you think, to have a child really late. I think this was a miracle, like a complete miracle, that the woman had went through IVF, artificial means to have a child at 58. How many people can do that? Right. So remember when Jennifer Aniston famously lamented that she wished someone had told her to freeze her eggs before it was too late. And then now the ship has sailed, so she doesn't have an option. So I think that for women considering, having a child, they must take into consideration the biological constraint. Again, like aging, this is a constraint that can't be reversed, no matter how rich you are, right? So many like movie stars, like rich and famous, they can't combat the biological clock, right? So it's like you can't turn back age, you can't turn back time, you can't turn back the clock. It's the same. Like everyone is like born the same. Okay, so some people have miracles, but the majority don't. So I would say that this incident, like this case of someone having a child at 58 should not be taken as a norm, but a really, really big exception. So, in order to not have regrets, besides taking the matter into your own hands and not waiting for the right person to come around, yeah, you should consider, things like egg freezing, before it's too late, when you're still in your prime, so that you do have the option to revisit having a child. Everyone's fertility journey is different. And even for men as well, I also believe that, even though men don't have biological clocks ticking, right? They can have a child when they're 70 to 90, but it's still not fair for the child to be losing a parent when they're 10 or something, if they're like father is 70 when they have a child. So what if, men can have children and they don't have to worry about the clock ticking and they can have it whenever they want? But it's just plain selfish if you decide to have a child when you're 70, I think. Because yeah, it'll just like uh so what about in the perspective of the child? Of course, for you, you're like, well, I have no limit and I have the money, the resources, and everything. The child will be well equipped. So nothing to be fearful of. Like, just send me to a home if they can't take care of me. Like, I have the resources for that and everything. But you're not thinking about the child's well-being. You're not putting that at the fore. Like losing a parent when they're 10 or something, it's not a good feeling. What is the meaning of having one at that old age anyway? Is it to fulfill a legacy of yours? Some sort of like ego fest, or you married a really young woman and you want to keep them company when you're dead, right? So it's not fair to the child, in a nutshell, to have it when you're like super old. So yeah, so at the end of the day, there is such thing as too old. Yeah. So bear in mind, if you have plans to have a child, then, take the matter into your own hands and don't start too late to plan for it. It'll be better for you and the child. And think of the child's well-being in the future, in the long run, and not just think of immediate delights, is what I'm thinking. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any comments and suggestions, please go on to our Instagram page. And then next week, we're gonna sort out life and love again, one chat at a time. Remember to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode.